Hey everyone, so I'm putting this video up as a self-reflection, thinking out loud type of thing because recently I have been starting to severely question my path, and I wanted to think out loud and show you guys kind of what I'm thinking about and see if anybody else is going through this. Maybe this video will help you in some way. So currently, what I am thinking is I'm starting to question whether I should go to medical school or not. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. During my undergrad, I studied biomedical engineering. That was my major, and then I had a minor in engineering mathematics. And during that time, I didn't really decide that I wanted to go into medicine or to med school until about the beginning of my junior year. So I went into undergrad undecided. I didn't know what major I wanted to do because I liked science, but I also liked things like psychology and being creative. But I ended up taking a lot of career assessment tests and things like that, and I figured out I like medicine. I also have an interest in physics and math, so I ended up merging that and doing biomedical engineering. So during my first and second year, I was more focused on, I like engineering, so I'm going to pursue that potentially as a career path. But then towards the end of my sophomore year, I ended up kind of shifting direction and starting to do more of the clinical volunteering, the shadowing, the volunteering, and other community service type of things. And so at that time, when I was shadowing, I think one thing we don't realize when we shadow is my school had a requirement or a suggestion that you should have shadowed 100 hours, you should have 100 hours of clinical volunteering or just volunteering in general. And so I started doing the shadowing, and I think a lot of other people start to do the shadowing just because it's a requirement. And during that time, I don't think we really realized the value of why you should be shadowing. So at that point in time, I was thinking to myself, oh, they make us shadow, and when we're shadowing, we should be learning something about medicine. So I went into shadowing surgeries or shadowing just office visits with patients, thinking, oh, I should be learning something. I think I was blinded by medicine, and I was like, oh, this is a cool procedure. I need to write down the steps of the procedure or the surgery, or I need to write down and remember the diagnosis. But what I didn't realize is I should actually be looking at the doctor and their lifestyle, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Is it something that's interesting to me? Is this what I envision my life to be like 10 years down the road? And I didn't think about that until very recently. So in retrospect, I'm going back and thinking, when I was shadowing this surgery, was it fun to me? Was it enjoyable? Was it something that I can see myself doing later in my life? And so now I'm starting to question those things and really realize I'm not quite sure if this is the right thing for my personality, for my desires in the long term. And so a little bit more background is, after my undergrad, I had applied to a few different things. So I had applied to med school right directly out of undergrad. I had also applied to some backup things like a English teaching program in France and the Fulbright program. If you don't know the Fulbright program, they basically send US students abroad to countries to either teach English, to do research, or if you are a scholar, to teach your specialty. So I had applied to teach English in Poland. And what ended up happening is I actually got into an in-state medical school. I also received the English teaching position in France, as well as the English teaching position through Fulbright. And so at that point, I think my decision was difficult, but I decided to reject the medical school acceptance. And, for personal reasons, one of the main things was I didn't actually like the school. It was an in-state school, but I didn't feel like I was in a good environment when I went to visit, and so on and so forth. And the other thing was I saw the Fulbright program as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that, med school is always going to be there, and I felt like I wasn't as committed at that time, so I opened up a spot for somebody that was really committed and wanted to go, and I pursued the Fulbright scholarship so I could gain some experience outside of school, because I felt a little bit burned out after undergrad, and now I really am thankful for the fact that I took some time off and experienced something else, because I think when we're in undergrad we kind of have this tunnel vision, and you're like, all med school, study med school, gotta go straight into it, I have to be as young as possible, I need to get through it now because later I won't want to do it. But I think that's a mistake. At least for me, it was good that I am out of med school, because it allowed me to experience a lot of different things, being abroad, being in a different environment, observing other medical systems, and reflecting more on who I am and what I want to do, rather than just being in this undergrad tunnel vision and thinking, I need to do what everybody else is doing, I need to go into med school like everybody else, and if I fail and I don't get in now, then I'm just a failure for the rest of my life. So I think if you are burnt out from undergrad, if you feel like you need to go through some self-discovery, then you should definitely think about taking some time off after undergrad. So I've spent 2 years out of undergrad, or 1.5 years thus far, and I have been abroad teaching, and more recently, so I started questioning if med school was the right thing for me. I actually applied again for the second time, and I had interviews, or one interview thus far, at Mayo Clinic, and what I felt was different than I felt the last time. So the first time I applied to med school, the first cycle, I was very excited for interviews, I was very excited for the application itself, I was excited for everything. But this time around, when I received, when it was time to do the applications, I just didn't feel that excitement. When it was time to go to the interview, or when I received my interview, I didn't feel excited. When I was there, I felt interested, but I didn't feel as excited as I had in the past. And so more recently, especially after my interview, I started questioning myself and thinking, is this really the path that I want to take? Do I want to go through that many years of schooling and end up realizing that this isn't what's meant for me? And I think the main reason is maybe I'm psyching myself out, because I've read a little bit more about, stress in med school, residency, and being an actual attending doctor, but also burnout rates and suicide rates and all of that toxic nature that we don't talk about, because we glorify medicine and we glorify the idea of being a doctor, but we don't really realize what the reality of being a doctor is like, and how difficult it is, and how mentally taxing it is, and how exhausting it can be, and how hard it is on family life. And we don't really realize what you're doing on a day-to-day basis as a surgeon, as just going to patient clinics and things like that. And so in my mind, I have no doubt that if I start med school, I can succeed in it. So I know that I can go through it. But what I'm doubting is this the life that I want long term? I think that personally, as someone with an engineering background, I have a lot of different interests in innovation, technologies, creating things, problem solving, critical thinking, and I think those things are present in medicine, but not to the extent that they might be in engineering. And so I'm starting to think that I'm more drawn towards going in the biomedical engineering path, because you still get an aspect of medicine, but you're just looking at it from a different perspective, and you're kind of trying to problem solve and create things to solve problems in medicine, or create devices in medicine. But my main concern is kind of the balance in life of what you get to do outside of your job, because being a doctor becomes your lifestyle. And I think that's one thing that I'm not sure. So right now, that's what I'm debating and thinking through. So I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts on medical school. If you ended up doing a career and then you decided to go into medicine, or if you went into medicine and you dropped out and you realized you loved doing something else. I would love to hear other people's suggestions and thoughts, because it's hard for me to currently decide what I want to do. Granted that I don't have an acceptance yet. but I'm also considering applying to engineering programs like master's programs and PhDs just to have options. But at the end of the day, it's a tough decision of which way do I go? Will I regret it? Is this worth taking the risk? Is this worth not taking the risk? So again, guys, I would love to hear anybody's comments down below and see kind of what you're struggling with, or if you have any insight into anything at all. How did you decide on your career path? How did you decide that medicine was for you or that it was not for you? If you're an engineer, do you love doing engineering? How do you know what is the right path for you? Thank you all for listening, and this has been my reflection on should I go to medical school.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's